You're listening to Beast Over Burden, powered by Barbell Logic.
We're Niki and Andrew, your personal professional coaches.
We help you take control of your fitness through hard but doable training and nutrition practices that fit your busy life.
Build a stronger, healthier version of yourself with lifelong habits. Hey, and welcome to Beast Over Burden, powered by Barbell Logic. I'm here with you, Niki Sims, the CXO of Barbell Logic, as well as a strength and nutrition coach. And as always, Andrew Jackson.
Back again.
Back again. Well, I really liked our episode last week and all of the episodes that came before it. But this one I'm pretty excited about. We're continuing our discussion about living life with physical freedom. But along the way, there are going to be some obstacles. There are common pitfalls. So we're going to talk about those today and give you some strategies on how to overcome them.
I like it.
Mm-hmm. So there was a phrase we were talking about how the road to... This is a phrase that we actually couldn't remember. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Is that right?
Yes, I think that's how it goes.
But we have this idea that we've created. We have first principles that we've discussed. We have this really lovely image of being happy with our bodies and confident in our choices and understanding of our trade-offs. But it's not always going to be easy. There are things that you're going to have to learn. There are things that we've learned, and we've recognized what those can really be articulated as. So, Andrew, what's one thing that comes to mind for you?
The quote that I was actually trying to remember was, "The best laid plans of mice and men often go awry."
The best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. I don't think I've ever heard it said that way. Okay.
There you go. Yeah.
So,
and
plan to make mistakes, basically.
Exactly. No matter what your intentions are, circumstances and the people that you're around, the situations that you're in will throw you curveballs. So I think a benefit of having physical freedom, as we've been describing it, is that you can roll with those punches. But I think there are some common problems and pitfalls that I've certainly encountered, and I think others will as well on the journey, even in a point where you have physical freedom, or you feel like you have physical freedom. There's going to be times where you kind of reset, or you have to step back and take stock of what's going on.
It's like freedom creep.
Yeah, exactly. And without getting into too much of like a psychology discussion, I think there's some interesting trends, as we were talking before, about what's usually behind those freedom creep moments or those pitfalls. If you think about what is at the heart of physical freedom or financial freedom, I think it's being in a position of consciously choosing what you're going to do with your time, money, or your body. And many of the pitfalls, as we started listing kind of concrete examples, I think you can boil them down to a momentary loss of that conscious choice. You're usually backsliding into some sort of reactivity.
Yeah.
You're reacting to either your emotional state or your physical circumstances or your urges or thoughts or whatever comes up in the moment, or somebody presenting an opportunity that maybe you haven't had a choice to make before.
Yeah.
And you, without consciously choosing what you want, you just react. So starting with that sort of nebulous point, an example that one of our listeners brought up and wanted to ask us about is, what do you do about snacking? We have this baseline that we talked about, and that, you're establishing these habits of consistent food choices. But snacking, to me, is a great example of one that completely and very quickly will take you out of your baseline.
It's a very quick 500 calories.
Man, there is just something so good about crackers and cheese and wine
so
and meats and fatty meats on a plate that you can
It's such
assemble.
an adventure of taste. It's really yum.
And yeah, without really much effort or even feeling like you're eating very much.
Or it's just mindless snacking when you're in the pantry and you're like, what am I going to make for a meal? And then you start chomping on just the thing that's easiest to open in the pantry. And then all of a sudden you've had like 2 handfuls of chips. And you're just like, shoot, what just happened?
Another common one, maybe a little bit different than snacking, but it's sort of in that category where a lot of times you'll see parents when they do their VFD. It's
Oh,
like,
yes.
oh, well, my daughter didn't finish the pizza. So
Big one.
my son left half a slice. So I just ate another slice. I'll put all of those kind of under the bucket of, it's not unconscious eating, but it's not conscious eating. You're not usually, at least if I put myself in that perspective and ask, what's usually going on when I have those snacks? It's not always full on mindless snacking, but there's usually not mindful snacking.
I can always tell the difference when I'm tracking my macros in my snacking, because when I'm tracking my macros, I just hardly snack. And if I do, it's weighed and measured and entered.
Right.
So that's where it's more mindful. It's like, I know exactly what I'm doing. I know how much I'm having. I know how it fits into my overall plan. But when I'm not tracking, then it's just really easy for me to go, just like gobble away.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is a strategy to deal with snacking, to manage snacking, but I almost feel like that's the solution end for you, right? Like it almost doesn't count as snacking.
That's how I notice the difference between mindful and not mindful. Is when I'm doing that. So
strategy 1, you could argue, would be to weigh and measure.
Yeah.
Would you say that is a strategy to manage snacking?
Yeah. And going before it is having awareness of it. When you like just snap out of when you're like zoning out in the kitchen and all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I'm just eating handfuls of this. And like, you may not even be appreciating the taste. It's just like really zoned out chomping.
That was 100% me.
Yeah.
When I was 270 to 280 pound Andrew, before I worked on some of these things, and what was interesting about it is I would go through periods of weighing and measuring, and I would cut down to 240, but then I would argue my baseline was 270 to 280, because the second I stopped tracking, I would just sort of like float my way back up.
Interesting.
Maybe not quite so far, but definitely back up to 260. And I just kind of had this 260 to 270 kind of baseline. And what I didn't notice until I started paying attention is that I would come home from work, and I've talked about this before. We had these mason jar of different types of nuts: walnuts, almonds, cashews. And I would just grab a few handfuls of those. And then my daughter, Clara, was really into string cheese at the time. And I'd grab 2 or 3 of those and, 2 or 3 IPAs. And I didn't even consider that eating. Like, it wasn't even registering in my brain as eating. It was like,
right,
I'll just have a couple nibbles of this and that.
Yeah.
And not even really paying attention to like you said, to the taste or how I felt.
Yeah.
It was
just like kind of zoning out.
Sometimes I'd do that while I was cooking.
Yeah.
While nibbling on what I was cooking.
You still do that when you're cooking. You nibble an entire brisket.
Then when I went to go enter that into my tracking, I realized it was sometimes over 1,000 calories.
For sure. Easily. Yeah. It's so fast. And then you're like, and then what'll happen is you will lose your appetite for a meal where you get a lot of nutrients. When that comes up with clients, I learned this from Jillian, is you ask yourself, what is this behavior accomplishing? What job is the snacking doing? For you, it might have been, I'm home from work, I'm decompressing, I'm hungry. So you're nibbling on stuff, but then it just kind of gets carried away, So it's like awareness of it. Then you can ask yourself, what is this doing? And then do you actually need a meal? How about maybe it's time to have an actual meal?
I think it's a great point, with awareness being number 1, because that gives you a little break. Before you act, pause and try to pay attention to what it is that maybe it's a need, maybe it's just a craving. Like, what is driving the action? And that, I've often found, helps me make a more conscious decision, because a lot of times what I'm really craving, if I pay attention, it's something salty and crunchy.
Yeah.
So, okay, I want something salty and crunchy. What can I eat, or what can I do that will kind of scratch that itch that says, low impact to my baseline as possible. And a example that I've found that I love that really does it for me is sliced cucumber with salt on it. I don't know why, but it gives me the crunchiness. It gives me something cold, which I also usually like, and it gives me something to just put salt on. I get a version of what chips kind of do for me, or what pretzel sticks, or just that, or popcorn, but it's at like 0 calories basically.
Yeah.
There's an old bodybuilding trick I saw one time too that apparently is really popular to do cucumber slices and hot sauce. Some people, whatever. But that for me is an example of how I have kind of backed into something very low calorie that scratches the urge.
Yeah.
That kind of gets me into that rummaging through the pantry kind of mindset.
Yeah. And the other thing to check in with is if you find you're frequently snacking, you might not be eating meals regularly enough, as you end up just really hungry. And you don't have like I have total brain fog when I'm hungry, and I can't even fathom putting a real meal together. So then you might just be snacking because you're not having regular meals.
Yeah, I would also offer a way of framing that to, if it's truly hunger that's driving you and it's not just some like craving, which often a craving, I would argue, is coming from hunger that you haven't, or thirst that you haven't recognized as one of those. So thing one could be have a couple glasses of water first, or a La Croix or some sort of like low to no calorie drink to see if maybe that helps kind of chill things out. And then the other would be, well, rather than a snack, maybe it is either more frequent meals, or you need to build a meal.
Yeah, exactly.
That actually fits within what you need. Or like maybe you truly need to step way back and look at your baseline and challenge whether you're getting enough calories to meet your needs.
I might just be hungry. And then the last thing I'll suggest is you could just pop a Zen pouch. Just kidding. I do not recommend that. I'm just kidding.
Another strategy that's really popular that I actually get from observing Brittany Snyder, our director of nutrition's visual food diary, is she will set a target for, it's sort of like somewhat like what you described, but it's a controlled snacking kind of scenario where she'll put it into a separate bowl instead of eating straight out of the bag.
Yeah.
And she'll set a limit for, whatever period she's snacking. So for her, a big unwind part of the day, hopefully she doesn't mind me sharing this, but I don't think she's talked about this before, is defining her after dinner kind of couch wind down time snack. And that's a way to put boundary conditions on the snack instead of it just being an open-ended thing, which I think is a great segue into
my favorite topic.
What are we calling them? Setbacks or
pitfalls and
pitfalls. Thing number 2, how would you describe that?
Boundaries and circumstances.
I was going for all or nothing thinking.
Oh, yes. That's a great one. Let's do that.
Because, so like the all or nothing thinking is in a snack context. I'm going to sit down with this entire bag of chips and I'm not going to pay attention to what I eat. Or the nothing is, well, I can't have chips because chips bad. Versus I think financially free mindset would be, I'm going to have some chips and enjoy the chips.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to eat the entire bag of chips unless I want to eat the entire bag of chips. Yep. So all or nothing thinking was the first one. Not to say I don't want to get to the boundaries one, because I think that's
we are
awesome.
coming up to that one. Don't you worry, everybody. Yeah.
How would you help people, or how would you describe the all or nothing problem?
Yeah, this all or nothing one, it's really interesting. When I see it repeated, to me, that just does not equal physically free, because you're just like a victim of big emotions or a victim of your circumstances. And we'll talk about that circumstances in a little bit, but you're either like really on and everything has to be 100%. And if it's not 100% right, there's no room for error and you're like completely off, which would mean training 4 days a week, conditioning 2 to 3 days a week, going to jujitsu, going paleo, thinking about 75 hard. And if you're not doing all of those things, you are doing nothing at all. and there's like no in between.
That's your mindset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I see it as long bouts of being absent from the gym. And then when you come back, it's I've gained this much weight. Can we do all these things? I should sign up for a meet. And it's just like very clearly, I want to do it all, or I'm not doing anything at all. And I don't feel good.
Have you ever had periods of that approach, that mindset?
I'm sure I have. Do you know if I have? You probably know better than I do.
Well, I mean, you've talked about it in the past. There were times when you would either train at a black iron gym or zero training. Like there had to be the ability to squat, bench, deadlift, and press, or you wouldn't train at all.
Yeah.
That's a version of, would you consider that a version of all or nothing?
Yeah. Yeah. It has to be perfect or nothing at all. And then sometimes, like in that case, it was like, this isn't good enough for me and for what my values are. So it's not even worth my time.
And how have you noticed your mindset change over time? Are there ways that you mitigate that pitfall?
Yeah. And that was a long time ago, but have become so much more open-minded to what being productive in the gym can look like. And it's more fun. I find that I end up being kinder to other people, when I had that state of mind, it was like everybody in the Globo gym was doing silly bullshit and they looked ridiculous. And now I'm just so much more understanding, just like, you know what, that's their journey. If they want to do that movement, it's important to them. Maybe it feels really good. Maybe they have an injury. Great. They're here at the gym. Awesome. It just feels quite a bit better. But yeah, being way more open-minded to what being productive can look and feel like.
Yeah, I think it's sort of, there's three parts to it in my mind. One is clarity of mission. So rather than the mission being to do 4 barbell lifts or eat paleo, it's that you're sustaining the quality of your life through physical activity, resistance training, and eating nutritious food that supports your goals.
So you really dig into, the layers of why.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
being clear allows you to let go of some of the dogma, which is really shortcut thinking to the real mission. And then that allows part 2, which is more flexibility to make choices, which does require part 3, an understanding of the choices that you're making and conscious choice to do those things.
And taking responsibility for it.
Right, exactly. So by being clear on what it is that you're really trying to do, understanding how to do it, and then being flexible enough in your thinking to make the conscious choice, then now you've got physical freedom. That's sort of the antithesis of all or nothing thinking in my mind. Like all or nothing thinking can work for people. And I know some people's brains are very successful with that, but it's very rigid and it does not, to me, feel like physical freedom.
Yeah.
So if you find yourself in a position where you notice, I think that's other thing one, is if you notice you're making a lot of binary all or nothing type choices, stop, or, one, congratulate yourself for noticing it. That's always the first step. But then 2, pause and really reflect on, okay, what is it that I'm really trying to accomplish here by doing one or the other? Again, like if it's the all, what I usually find is that there's some need not being fulfilled because of an extended period of time of restricting yourself from doing what it is that you really want or that you need as part of your life. And then it just like, blah, your body's like,
take me to the trees.
Fine, we're taking over. And it might not be like a survival need, but maybe it's some component of enjoyment or whatever. There's something that you are holding yourself back on that eventually your body's just going to take over. Your brain's going to take over.
Yeah. And I think when you look back at that, that's a good opportunity to be kind to yourself. I think some people will look back on their nothing phases and be like embarrassed and be like, oh, I was such a piece of bleep and I never want to be like that again. I was fat. And like you were just saying, figure out there was something going on there that you really wanted and that made you feel good until it made you not feel good. What was that?
Isn't it interesting how the nutrition and exercise are on opposite ends of that spectrum? Like nutrition, all or nothing, means you ate all the bag of food or you ate nothing. The exercise, all or nothing, is you did nothing or you did all the things.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's
It's
interesting. Yeah.
they're inverses of each other in terms of their impact on your health, unless you're fully starving yourself, I guess. But okay, so all or nothing. And then you brought up earlier, I think a great one, boundaries. I guess what's a good segue from all or nothing to segue? Maybe all or nothing usually comes from somebody who doesn't have good boundaries.
Well, yeah, exactly. Like you might find that there are many circumstances in your life that don't support the behaviors that keep you kind of even keeled.
Such as,
So things like traveling a lot for like really fun activities like eating and drinking, or you have to go out for work a lot and take people out and it ends up being lots of boozing and stuff like that. If your sleep schedule is really disturbed by your phone hygiene, or you have a bunch of roommates that keep you up all night, or if
boyfriend who wants to keep watching the next episode
like just,
or the entire episode.
Yeah. When we have the full ability now in 2025 to pause an episode and come back to it. Anyway,
Side note, one of those things in life that I had no concept of even being possible. Like it did not compute in my brain that you could just not finish a show once you started it.
And you finish it the next time that you're watching.
No, I thought you had to, once you start, you have to watch something in its entirety, regardless of how long
This
it
is
is.
a good example of my bedtime boundaries. But yeah, circumstances, and it could also be like groups of friends who, when you're around, they're like, let's go drink, let's go brunch, let's do this. And like protein just isn't a thing. And
Or family.
while I love those friends and I have a lot of those times, I find that those repeatedly just don't make me feel good, you know?
There was a recent trip I remember you went on, and I got a text message at like midnight. It was like, there's zero protein in this house. Unacceptable. And it was like emergency trip to protein store.
I couldn't find any. I was so hungry. I was just like, I guess I'll just go to bed. But the story there is there might be circumstances that make it impossible or very challenging to stay even keeled, to keep even, or not to be all or nothing, is what I'm trying to say. And there might be, I'm thinking of people who will maybe be negative about what's important to you. So if you are trying to make changes to your nutrition habits and that involves eliminating things for a while or entirely, and those things are important to like your friends, and you say, I'm not going to do this anymore, that might not be received very well. That can be quite challenging. So in some cases, it might be wise to just eliminate those circumstances entirely. I keep coming back to drinking because that ends up leading to second glass of wine in, you're like, time to snack on everything.
I think I just basically heard you say, if your friends want to drink and you don't want to drink, you need to eliminate your friends. I think that was
No.
like the syntax of that sentence is really what you just said.
I'm trying to say that you need to be selective with that time, but keep your friends if you want to. But some friend groups, I know people have various friend groups. Some are like party friend groups. Some are like the yoga and tea friend groups. And maybe if you just understand how you behave around certain people, that could really impact the behaviors that make you feel certain ways.
Yeah. What I more seriously would say I'm hearing is that it's important to recognize that your circumstances have an impact on your choices and oftentimes how much energy it takes to maintain a boundary.
Yeah, totally.
And that physical freedom requires owning the boundary. And owning the boundary could be a very wide spectrum of things. It could be choosing to put yourself in that situation, knowing that you're going to have to uphold that boundary under pressure, social pressure, circumstantial pressure, whatever it is. But maybe making that choice is worth it to you. The other is maybe you need to remove yourself from being in the circumstance where you have to uphold that boundary. But the one rule that binds them all is being aware that it's your responsibility and it's your boundary to maintain. It's nobody else's fault. Whether you ate that way, drank that way, did that thing, it's yours. And taking ownership is a really big step. Taking ownership of the boundary is a really big step. And it doesn't mean we could go down a whole rabbit hole of what it means to hold a boundary, but holding a boundary doesn't mean telling somebody not to do something. And then the thing happens and therefore it's their fault because they violated your boundary. You violated your boundary by being in a situation where it could happen. That's sometimes that's the choice you make, but that's what it means to own it. And so think really carefully about how to, without being too negative about other people, like how do you put yourself in as many situations and scenarios where you're not having to constantly fight for your boundaries.
Yeah. How can you plan for yourself?
And then when you are, really, be ready to expend some energy. Really, I think that's really what it comes down to, is that it just takes energy when you're in a situation where you have to hold your own boundary.
Yeah, big time. And when you can plan for that, meaning like plan what you're going to eat, when you're going to eat it, when you're going to go to bed, then it'll feel like you could still achieve something. I keep thinking of times like work trips where there would be discussions going on at 10 p.m. over whiskey, and all I want to do is go to bed. But it's so much FOMO of like, well, these are important work discussions. I can't go to bed. So what has to happen there is maybe I create opportunity for those discussions to happen at other time. What role can I play in this? Instead of, I can't impose a bedtime for other adults.
Right. But maybe in those scenarios, the ones that come to mind, it's not like we're consciously, in a lot of cases, we're not consciously trying to keep staying up,
Oh, I know.
Sometimes, yes. But sometimes it's just, we're in the moment, we're in the flow. And yeah, you would suggest, well, how about we schedule a time at 6 a.m. and get up and have this conversation, which very quickly leads to, well, we need to go to bed like right now then.
Yes. Another strategy that works well for times like that is just putting on Hamilton, because then people start singing and then people just go to bed.
Because then Andrew and Matt start harmonizing and...
Yep. And I'm like, okay, I will sleep.
Yeah. Good distraction move. Well, another fun tactical one that we picked up from one of our investors, Wade, was the Campari and soda.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
If you're in a situation where everybody's got a drink, get the 15% watered down with, sparkling water. Now,
still has plenty of taste. Yeah.
You've got a little bit of a drink. So that, to me, that's one that kind of blends it all together, maintaining a boundary.
Yeah.
It's not all or nothing thinking. Like, you're still having a drink, but it's a lower percentage alcohol, more hydrating option. And you hold your boundary and go to bed early without...
I love a hydrating cocktail.
Hydrating cocktail, exactly. So yeah, there you go. There's 3 kind of common big bucket pitfalls and some ways to handle them and think about them.
Yeah.
Hopefully that was helpful.
Hopefully it is. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll be back with you here next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.